All right. Welcome to our competition prep series. I am your Pennsylvania DECA State Vice President, Joshua Nolf. With me here today, I have your District 2 representative, Riley Collins, helping me host this competition prep series on role plays. Also with us, we have our panelists. We have to talk about team role plays. We have Emma, your state reporter, and Kendall, your District 4-5 representative. Along with that, we have here to talk about individual role plays, your state treasurer, Louie, and with us here from National DECA, we have Mitch to talk about professional selling events. Go ahead, Riley. I'll give it to you now.
Hi everyone, as Josh said, I'm Riley Collins. I'm your District 2 rep for this year, and I'll be co-hosting with him tonight. We are going to be talking to some wonderful panelists on how to give a DECA epic role play. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it to Emily and Kendall Allen to talk about team role play events.
Okay, so Emma and I, we're at Nationals this year, and so we have a couple tips for you guys to work on your team role plays. Our first tip is when you go into the role play, you should shake the judge's hand, and then after you both shake their hand, you should ask to be seated before you just go ahead and sit right down. It's just a gesture to show politeness, and judges really appreciate it when you do that.
And then also throughout the role play, try to use the judge's name if one is given. It just personalizes it and makes it more interactive.
While you're presenting, if you think of like a rhetorical question or a question that you know the judge will be able to answer, for example, like, have you ever experienced this within your company? Something easy that the judge can say like yes or no to. It's a great way to keep them engaged and so that you know they're paying attention to your role play, because a lot of times the judges will have to sit through the same role play over and over again. So it just helps both you and the judge actively participate in the presentation.
And then right at the beginning when Kendall and I go in, we each introduce ourselves individually. It's just important to split up the talking and make sure it's not just one person talking.
And it's a good first impression too. So then when you get started with your role play, you want to present the KPIs one by one. So those KPIs will be located on the first page of the case study. And what you do is when you cover each KPI, make sure that you restate the KPI word for word exactly as it appears on the case study, because it'll go in order for the judge on the judge scoring sheet, and they'll know exactly which one you're talking about at that time.
Right, and then when you're going over all of your KPIs, make sure before your presentation, make sure you predetermine with your partner who's going to say what, and you want to make sure that's broken up maybe by bullet point rather than KPI, just so that there's that back and forth interaction.
A lot of times teams will split it up by KPI, and I just think it's more of an advantage if you do it by bullet point, because it shows that you can really cooperate with your partner a lot better, instead of just like your partner knows half of the information and you know the other half of the information. It's much more cooperative, and that way it looks like less embarrassing if your partner has something to add in at the end of the KPI that you might have missed. So that's a lot easier. When you're talking about the case study and you're talking about the KPIs, if you reference like specific minor details in the case study, for example, like the kind of product or how they're selling it or something like that, it'll help you stand out, because a lot of times contestants speak about the case study very generally, so referencing specific details will help you seem like you really read the case study and you really know what you're talking about.
And even if you don't know what you're talking about, you want to make sure it sounds like you do. So just be confident when you're talking and make the judge really believe that you know what you're saying. And so Kendall and I usually like to memorize a few like facts and statistics before we go into the role play. One that we use is like it costs 7 times as much to obtain a new customer rather than just retain an older one. And so the judges are really impressed by these specific facts, and so that's one way you can stand out.
And if you have a couple general ones, you can usually incorporate them across all role plays, so you don't need to memorize a new fact like every time you have a role play. We've used that one quite a few times. Try to draw in real world examples in your role play, especially if it's like a marketing strategy or something that you can relate it to the real world. Maybe give an example of a company who was very successful in using a similar kind of marketing strategy. That's always impressive because it shows that you're looking beyond just DECA and you're looking into how the skills you're learning are actually applicable in the real world and how the case study is more of like a real world situation.
And then at the end of the role play, if the judges have two predetermined questions that they have to ask you, and so when they ask you that, you should start responding to each question by saying, "That's a great question," or some kind of compliment to the judge, and then try to split up the questions. Maybe each person answers one question, but don't be afraid to jump in if you feel like your partner didn't address the question fully or something like that.
When you think you're all done, I guess this would be before questions, it's always a good idea to go over the most important points that you covered or points that you think you might still need to clarify. Sometimes a summary sheet is a good idea to present to the judge. They do get to keep your notes afterwards, so if you just go through like the really important things that you covered, then it'll sort of wrap everything up for the judge and make it nice and...
Yeah, and then at the very end, after all the questions and everything, we like to give them a business card that we made during our prep time. So that would just have our names on it and our company and maybe an email we made up. And then we would give that to them and we would ask if we could schedule a follow-up meeting, because this shows that you're like interested and you want to continue the conversation. So that's a good way for you to end.
And our best advice that we can give to you is that practice makes perfect, because personally, our first roleplay was not very good, but the more you do it, the better you get, because you just find that once you have like the system down, it's easy to just take the KPIs and just get through it and sound good. So yeah, that's all we have.
That's awesome, guys. One question for you that I would like to have you guys touch upon would be, how do you manage the time, being that you guys are a team, how do you manage the small amount of time that you have to read your case study, understand it, come up with a solution, but also manage who's going to say what at what times? Because if you talk over each other, or like you have that where Kendall might be talking but Emma accidentally interrupts but like didn't mean to, it doesn't look great to the judge. So how do you manage that time so these mistakes don't happen?
Great question, Josh. So at the beginning of prep, we read the roleplay together, or the case study together, so that way we both understand it and we'll ask each other questions about what the case study actually consists of. And then we split up the KPIs when we do them, and then we'll sort of like switch and fill in missing information. And then at the end of our prep time, when it's wrapping up, we'll go through it together really quick and sort of decide then.
Yeah, and then I think, as Kendall said before, we like to practice, and so we've kind of learned when each other, if Kendall needs help explaining something during the interview or something like that, then I know when to jump in. So it's really important that you get to know your partner and get to know when they're trailing off or something, and so then you can jump in without really interrupting them, but rather supplementing them.
That's great, guys. Is there any last-minute advice that you guys would like to give to maybe someone who is just starting out with a team event? This is a lot to take in at one time, and especially with some of our district competitions just wrapping up, something you think that would benefit new members who are just taking on the idea of what DECA is, that they may not be able to understand everything that you said and what was going on until they do their first role play. Is there anything that maybe when you were freshmen going into it that made you nervous with doing a team event, or whenever you did your first team event, that you guys sort of look back on and was that was silly that we thought that way now that we're here?
I guess we thought it had to be very serious. Our first roleplay was really, really, really formal, but it's okay to make sort of puns and jokes about the situation. There was one role play we did. It was about a small bakery that needed financial assistance, and some of our slide titles and presentation sheets, we made sort of puns. We talked about their bakery and how certain things could be their icing on the cake and stuff like that. It's okay to get creative. So
yeah, and I think it's just important to remember that the judges aren't some scary person. They're being put in a new situation too, because it's not like they just judge DECA role plays on a regular basis. So it's okay to be, as Kendall said, creative or make things a little funny, but as long as you keep it professional, it's fine.
Awesome. Thank you both for that excellent advice. And you guys are placed second at nationals last year, so you definitely know what you're talking about. We're going to go to Louie next to talk about some individual role plays. So Louie, I'll let you take away any tips you have.
All right, thank you, Riley. I'm the Pennsylvania DECA State Treasurer. I'll be talking to you about individual role plays. Like Kendall and Emma said, individual role plays are very similar to team role plays. So mostly everything they said applies to these. When you walk in, it's very important to have a firm handshake, make eye contact with your judge, and wait to be seated. And make sure you never have gum in your mouth or anything like that. But then once you start talking, it's really important that you're confident, because the judges' confidence really sticks out to them. So if they see someone who really seems to know what they're talking about, even if you don't know what you're talking about, if you make it seem like you're very passionate about what you're discussing, then it'll really stick out to them. And then another way to stick out is if you have good handwriting and you prepared your ideas very well, you can share your notes with them throughout the presentation. That way it's more than you just saying words. They'll have something that they can actually look at, and that's really important. If you want to help keep these thoughts right in front of them, so that way if you say something and they really like it and you continue on, that they still have that in front of them, so that they're able to see this really great idea that you brought up, and then they won't forget it when they're asking you questions at the end. And then going along with that, it's really important to organize your thoughts in a very thorough manner. That way you don't miss anything, and you want to nail all of those performance indicators. So when you get your role play and you see all the stuff it's looking for on the front, you got to make sure in your notes that you talk about something at least once every time. A veteran advisor once told me a story about a student who got a role play, and one of the performance indicators, he just had no idea what it was. So say it was community service, and he had no idea what this is. But the judges, they're going to be looking for that, and if he doesn't talk about it, he won't get any points for it. So this kid goes in there, and he's given his role play, and then he gets to the part about community service, and he says, "Community service is one of the most important things we can do as a company." And even though he had no idea what he was talking about, he got so enthusiastic about it and stressed it so much that even if he didn't really give very much information about it, he still was able to get some points for it. So he might not have gotten, the full point value, but he was able to get more than, nothing. So it's really important to hit all of the performance indicators, and that's really one of the most important things you can do.
Thank you so much, Louie. Those are very, very good tips. I know I do an individual role play myself, and all of those things are very, very important. One question I have for you is, you have that time whenever you're planning, if you come across a performance indicator that you're not too familiar with, and you have that little extra time to at least think of something to say. What do you do when you're in your role play scenario if a judge asks you a question and you simply just don't know the answer? How do you come up with a quick response in that little time that you have to not give that awkward silence and show the judge that you don't know the answer to the question?
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. Because one of the most important things about these role plays is thinking on your feet, because you don't have a lot of time to prepare and you don't have a lot of time to think everything through. So while you're going through this, the judge might spring something on you that you have no clue. My best advice is to just go with your gut and say the best thing that you can think of while thinking it through, but at the same time, you want to make sure you give them a decent answer that they're not going to be very confused.
Awesome. So I have another question for you, Louis, real quick, because I know you've been to a few different like mock competitions and stuff and have heard advice from other people. So I'm just wondering, what is the best advice that you've received involving role plays?
Best thing you can do. Role plays, while they all have very different topics, they're all pretty much the same exact thing. It's just you and the judge. So getting comfortable with that is really important. So when you're practicing your role play, you could go ask your advisor for previous role plays and sit in front of a mirror and then speak to your as if you were giving the actual role play and practice from start to finish without any stops, because when you practice stopping, that's not helping you. You really want to practice doing the entire thing. That way you get the full experience while you're practicing it.
Awesome. Those are great tips for everyone that does an individual series role play. It's incredible to see how you can have so much success by just doing these little tips that all of us here are offering to you today. Up next, we have Mitch, who will be talking about professional selling events and her take on those and how we can better prepare ourselves for our professional selling events. So, Mitch, it's all you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So one thing I'm definitely going to stress to you over and over again is that I think a successful role play actually starts well before you even enter in front of your judges. I think it actually starts before you wake up the morning of your role play. I'm a firm believer that especially when it comes to professional selling events, you should practice, and then when you think you have your whole spiel down, practice some more because you probably don't. And then I also think that it's really important that the morning of your role play, you follow a routine. See, a lot of people like to wake up and I'm going to have 10 cups of coffee so I don't fall asleep and miss my role play, and I'm going to have this gigantic breakfast, that way I don't get hungry, and they do all this crazy stuff. But actually, it's not good for you to do that. It's been proven by plenty of psychologists that it's actually better for you to stick to a day-to-day routine when you have like a big test or a big event. So always stay true to your daily routine. If you shower before you eat breakfast, then on the day of your role play, shower before you eat breakfast. If not, it kind of throws your day off balance. And then once you get to, competition time, I think it's just really time for you to step up your game. They always say dress for success. Definitely wear what you think you look the best in because it's going to make you feel a lot better. It's going to give you really amazing confidence. And there's actually even a trick that I do. I have this green shirt. So when I'm not in my uniform, I wear this green shirt. It's a button down. I just wear a black tie with it. But it makes me feel really good because it is the same color as my eyes, and people are always like, wow, I really like that shirt. It makes me feel really confident. So that was like my lucky shirt. And that's something else I always tell people. If you have a safety net item, definitely don't be afraid to use it. Some people have like lucky watches, lucky underwear is one that I've heard a lot, a lucky DECA pencil, just whatever you think is going to bring you good luck. Just if it's something small and it's not noticeable, and if it's especially something you can wear, just take it with you because it's going to make you feel a lot better. And if you get nervous, even if it's just a watch, it's on your wrist and it's bringing you good luck. But when it comes to actual competition time, I would agree. It's really important that you make a great first impression because that's how your judge is going to remember you. You have a 20-minute long presentation, but it really comes down to that first 20 seconds of shaking your judge's hand. Don't forget to ask their name and introduce yourself. It's easy when you're nervous to just say, oh, hi, my name's Mitch, and I'm going to be talking to you about this. But then halfway through the presentation, you're going to want to call them by their name and realize you don't know it. So definitely introduce yourself, ask for their name. I'm not the kind of person that likes to sit when I do a role play, so I usually ask if it's okay for me to remain standing, and usually they say yes, that's totally okay. Don't feel weird if you do that. There's plenty of people that do that. And then I think that something else that a lot of people kind of mess up with, especially in professional selling events, is they don't keep time, and that can be really risky because even if you've done your role play 100 times and you're like, oh no, I know exactly where I should be at the 5-minute mark, it's easy when you get nervous to start rambling or to stutter and just kind of lose your train of thought. But if you have a watch, or, for me, when I would give my presentation, I would have a tablet and a computer. I would always make sure that I was watching the time on at least one of them, because when I was a junior, I went to Atlanta, and I was in the middle of a role play, and I realized that they weren't keeping time correctly, and they said that we have 5 minutes left. We actually had 10. So I had to cut my presentation short, so that way I could do what I believe is the most important thing of a professional selling role play, and that is close the deal. Always be closing is what I tell myself every time I go in, because I've had a lot of judges that I'm not sure if they like me or if they think I have like the most annoying voice or something, but they don't always seem enthusiastic, and I think sometimes they just kind of try to make us feel really professional and like intimidated. So it's just important that you close the deal no matter what you have to do. If you have to throw in a discount at the end, throw in a discount at the end. If they say, that's a really great presentation you just gave me, but I have some other people that, I'm meeting with, and I just want to see, what they'll offer me, offer them some incentive that if you get back to me by the end of the day, then I can get you X amount of dollars off of this, or I can do this for you. Just whatever you do, if you have a contract, which I think is a very important prop in a professional selling event, make them sign that contract. That's how they're going to remember you. It's not about how great your presentation was. You can have like solid white slides, and if you don't get, like, it doesn't matter if you don't get that closing deal, they're not going to remember you as well. But if you get them to close, you're going to be like, wow, that kid like really pushed for it. They really want this. They're really serious. That's when they take you seriously. And then just some like little tips throughout your role play. If you mess up, that's okay. There's been plenty of times where I've said something really dumb and just thought, wow, why did I say that? I've never said that in all of my practice. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to stutter. Just don't apologize. Keep going, because if you apologize, they're really conscious of the fact that you made a decision, like a little mistake. And I would say just don't try to overdo it. I think a lot of people come in with this brilliant idea that they're going to have like 10,000 props and like these beautiful poster boards and a computer, and sometimes it's the simple stuff that really counts because they're not distracted. They're not trying to go back and forth between 5 different things, and it's just organization is the most important thing, not how impressive your poster board is or your presentation. I think those are the things that really help me, and just being yourself, because a judge can really pick up on that if you go in there and try to be super serious. And you're not that kind of person. It's really obvious. So I'm the kind of person that throughout a role play, I get kind of uncomfortable with serious stuff. So I'll make jokes. It makes me feel better. It makes my judges feel a little bit better, and that's okay. Like, just be yourself. If you are a serious person, kind of quiet, embrace that. Just figure out what your talking style is and run with it, because if you try to go out of your comfort zone, you're less likely to do well. So I think those are probably the most important tips I would have for people doing all role plays, but especially professional selling events.
Those are awesome tips, Mitch. It seems like you obviously really know what you're doing, especially whenever you have that 20-minute presentation, and because most people our age aren't used to doing something like that. That puts you out of your comfort zone. I mean, role plays, we have 5 to 10 minutes to them, depending on what level you're at, and to be put in that situation to give a 20-minute presentation and sell this product and wow the judges is something that most kids and teenagers are not capable of doing, or at least think they're not capable of doing, but they really are. One point that you brought up is managing your time, and that's a big thing I've asked. I know I asked Kendall and Emma a question with that, but time is of the essence. And time is a very, very important thing whenever you're doing role plays. So you said if you're getting ahead of yourself and you realize you start to ramble and you know where you're supposed to be at the 5-minute mark, but you're not there, you're actually ahead, how do you make up for that time, or how do you manage your time back so you can get your thought process back on track? Because oftentimes that can mess with you mentally, realizing you're ahead, and then it can throw off your other thought processes because now you're nervous that you're not going to be able to fill the time. How do you deal with that stress and anxiety of being ahead and make up for it?
That's a really good question. That was actually something I had to figure out my first time to ever go to ICDC, because I'm a power talker. When I get into professional mode, I talk fast, and so My first year I didn't wear a watch, and that really came back to haunt me. So the second year I wore a watch. I do believe that, whether it be a watch or you're keeping time, on whatever device you're using for your presentation, just watch the time for one. That makes a huge difference. If you're going a little bit fast, it's easier to fix because you can slow down for one. And sometimes I've even gone as far as to ask a judge a question if they look really intrigued, like, oh, that seems like kind of weird. I'd be like, oh, you look like maybe you have a question. Is there something I could kind of help you clarify? Or sometimes I'll just elaborate a little bit if they seem kind of confused on something. Because sometimes, judges, they don't know exactly what we're talking about. This is kind of new to them too, like mentioned. So it's just easy to talk a little bit more about whatever it is. Like for me, I usually break it up into like 4 different categories. So there's like 4 different packages I'm selling on whatever it is, whether it be a cruise line or some kind of like hotel experience. I just have like more than one option. So if there's, I usually take extra time if I have it to like really pitch that last bonus one because it's the most expensive and it's the most important, and that's where you should spend your most amount of time. So that's what I do if I'm going too fast. But if I'm going too slow, usually I figure out which details I can cut out. So for instance, of these 4 packages, I repeat this same product 3 times. So I'm just going to, wrap it up and say, oh, in the gold package, you can have all the things you have in A, B, and C, but you also get this. Because it's easier to cut out little details that aren't important than to try to like cram your full presentation into, like 2 minutes that you have left. And then I just make sure that I always have a little bit of fluff room at the end for questions or for closing, because sometimes you get judges that are like really difficult to close a deal. So I'd say it's just like really figuring out if you can cut it out or if you need to speed it up, what's the most important stuff.
Okay. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for your great advice on how to give an epic role play. I think anyone watching is going to have a lot of information to process and to improve upon with these skills next time. So thank you very much to Emma, Kendall, Louie, and Mitch for their advice. I'm sure that people are going to definitely be able to utilize it. And I'm going to throw it back to Josh to give some final closing statements.
Once again, thank you all for coming out and being part of this. It was greatly appreciated. I know that any of the 4 panelists that we have here, if people watching have any questions at any time, I know all of these panelists would be willing to reach out and answer any question you have about things that they've said. Along with Riley and I, we are here. We both do role plays, and we're both willing to help out in any way that we can to make sure that people all across the country can make sure that they have an epic role play. That's one of our main concerns, and that's why we're doing these competition prep series, is to make sure that you, the members, are getting your full experience, especially out of the competition aspect of DECA. Before we go, I'd just like to make some announcements across Pennsylvania. If you are a chapter president, make sure you join us on our President's Council meetings. To get more information on that, please contact me. But we do two President's Council meetings a month, and one is at 7 p.m. and one is at 9 p.m. So if you can't make one, there's a second time slot for you to make the other one. They are great ways to join on with 2 officers, one being Donald or one being I, depending on the month. This month it will be me. And then we also have another officer, either a rep or a council member, to join us. It's all different every time, and it's a great way to stay connected and build that connection between our officer team and the members. It's awesome, and you can ask anyone that's been a part of it, that we've learned a lot, and we've really gotten to know each other through that. One program that we've been starting across Pennsylvania DECA each month is we've been having a member of the month. We take the time to look at submissions from you, the members, for if you have a peer that you think has gone above and beyond, you can take the time and nominate them on Pennsylvania DECA, our website, and you can submit that form to try and win the member of the month. And this month, for the month of November, we have Morena Corey from Moravian Academy is our member of the month. So she will be getting multiple shout-outs on Twitter and Instagram and all of that. And we're very honored with her and proud of her hard work this throughout November. And I know a lot of our officer team knows her, and I know a lot of people in Pennsylvania DECA know her, and she really has gone above and beyond, especially in the month of November. She has done an outstanding job. So we we congratulate her on her extra efforts across Pennsylvania DECA. If there's nothing else that the panelists would like to add, we will conclude this meeting. We can't thank you enough for being a part of it, and we hope that you all enjoyed and learned something new from this Hangout, and we hope that you can all ace your roleplay and have an epic roleplay and an epic rest of your year. Thank you all.